welcome to another episode of Don't Be a Doorstop. Today, I've realized that features are not good enough for businesses because you'll end up being copied by a big enterprise. Rewind to, do you remember Clubhouse? Do you remember what Clubhouse was?
Rings a bell a little bit.
So Clubhouse was an audio room that you could jump into, and you'd have speakers and listeners, and you could all have a chat roughly at the same time. So the technology was very good because you could talk over each other a little bit more and still hear each other.
Yep.
Rather as now it kind of like prioritizes one person over somebody else. So, but broadly speaking, it's audio rooms. Now that idea probably it is like a feature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once Clubhouse came out with that as their sole offering, they then months later get copied by Facebook, adds in their like Facebook Spaces or whatever they label theirs, and Twitter, now called X, add their Twitter Spaces. So that then starts to diminish Clubhouse's reign. You then, like, let's call it a year later, I don't use Clubhouse anymore. I'm not interested in it. And I assume that is the general population and vibe of the interest of it has gone down. So what's happened here? Clubhouse is essentially a feature. Yeah. Yes, it had a good community, but it wasn't long enough. It wasn't good enough to sustain that. And why is that the case? Now, fast forward to today, there are AI voice transcription startups that can take an audio file and transcribe it and put an accent on it into a different language. So I tried it with a tool called Hey Gen. I posted a video of me speaking in English. It translates it into Spanish with my accent. So it's as if I am speaking Spanish with my accent. And it also moves my mouth in relation to the Spanish translation. So it looks like I'm speaking Spanish. So there's a bunch of companies that do that, which essentially, again, is a feature, right?
Yeah.
Then yesterday or the day before, Spotify have integrated that feature into their podcasting platform. So they are not quite there with the morphing the mouth, but they are translating. So, for example, the podcast we love watching, which is the Stephen Bartlett Diary of a CEO, he now has a version of him speaking Spanish with his tone in it. They're just prioritizing like a couple of the big names to test out this stuff. But again, it's a feature. So those insert AI transcription or AI video translation startup here, that company or those startups end up dying out. Yeah. So why is that? I would say that it's not about community, because you could have a massive community, but it just like you can even get dwarfed with a community because they can have a bigger community. I would say, one, it's innovation. The fact that they're innovating quickly. So it's like the velocity of the innovation. And then two, I think it's the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So with Twitter have started to pay their creators. Now, we all know Threads turned up, which is Meta's version of Twitter. And loads of people flocked there to try it out, which is great. But then the ongoing users have died down. And it's it's nowhere near what Twitter's getting. And I would say that's probably because Twitter is actually paying creators some of the ad share, the ad money spent on the platform. Again, great innovation. And I would say that that's probably kept people over at Twitter. And Twitter's iterating into an ecosystem space. So because it's been renamed X wants to be like X everything. So you will be there for not only your Twitter stuff, you'll be there for your VIP community, you'll get paid there, you'll be able to I think they're doing investments, so you'll be able to do like investments there and so forth, and they want to build it out. Now China has a similar version of this kind of like everything app, which is called WeChat, which is predominantly their way of buying stuff like wallets, all that stuff, their chats, their like WhatsApps, it's all integrated into this WeChat thing. So I'm very much like, cool, how do I take this idea of innovation always needs to be priority so you don't get like fluffed out? And more than anything, like even previously, we all know ideas mean nothing. It's about execution. But really, it's not necessarily about execution. It's about the community. But sometimes at certain scales, it's not even about the community, because people are already on Spotify. They're already using it. It's already integrated into their ecosystem. So if you can add a feature to an ecosystem, it's more likely to keep somebody there. So with Insider, what's the application? I would say for me, I'm like, as musicians coming here for essentially a VIP tool for them to add music and have subscribers come on board as their VIP club, I need to make it more of an ecosystem by one, going further up the food chain and further down the food chain. So what does that look like? If we became a distributor, you would come here to put your music on our platform, and we would put your music on Spotify, Apple Music, and the rest of them, as well as you can spin a VIP aspect to it. Now, funnily enough, Spotify tried to become a distributor, but they cancelled. They stopped because they have a bunch of record labels invested in Spotify from a kind of like a commitment, like let alone a financial potential thing. So Spotify then cancelled their plans to become a distributor. So I'm like, this is very interesting. Spotify are like way out here. They've got leverage and stuff, but how do we build our leverage? And then after the fact is we build a sync platform. So not only are you monetizing through streaming as route one, you've then got VIP as route two, and then sync, which essentially is getting your music on TV, film, games and stuff as thing four. If you're just with us, then we can now, like, there's no need for you to go anywhere else, right? It's just a case of like pricing is the leverage handle that you can use, and we can add new features. So for example, cool, you've got our music here, so can we create a tool to help you advertise your music? Essentially a step-by-step Facebook ads for newbies that they're just clicking stuff, or Twitter ads, or Instagram ads, or TikTok ads, and so forth. So yeah, all this stuff is so inspiring, and these startups are like panicking that they're going to get crushed, wiped out. But some startups are like, actually, this is just proof that the idea works as well. So you can see it. But nonetheless, you've got to innovate. Otherwise, you'll be left behind.
There's surely some lack of knowledge of, I guess, the law, because I guess that's the only thing that you can do to slow it down, that someone basically buys you out because you've copyrighted it or patented it or whatever. So I guess as a startup, you probably are going for more the creative journey of either making something because you like it or making something to make money, rather than probably making something to then block it off with loads of legal stuff so no one can steal it. I'm assuming, unless someone's literally I'm going to build something to sell it off to a big player. If you're going at that angle, then you probably are got the nous to block everything off and patent it and make sure it's like a castle of like a fortress to some extent to take down. But then you're basically selling the keys to a house rather than your house getting robbed before you could sell it. It's really interesting. I think it is fascinating that I just wrote personal ecosystem, because I guess you were talking about ecosystems, but what was in my brain is, well, I'm thinking about the smart tech and how Apple has its ecosystem, but and all the other providers, Amazon, have their ecosystem. And I think that's what was quite clever with Apple creating a home app that all the ecosystems can integrate via this app. So you don't necessarily need all these 1,000,001 apps. But the difficulty is they've just partnered up with more of the expensive suppliers. So you have to get the best, not necessarily the best, but the most expensive for it to all to integrate. Because I was speaking with someone recently, how they said they've got a smart Hoover, smart lawnmower, lights, and it's got like 20 apps all going at once.
Yeah, it's all about the leverage, building leverage through innovation and dependency. If you can get somebody dependent on your stuff purely because they have 90% of their activities over here with you rather than somewhere else, and then it's a case of keep on innovating with pricing or features to keep them there, or rewards, right, to keep them coming on. But all this stuff is so fascinating. Again, it makes you think from a features perspective. Like, another thing that's come out this week is ChatGPT's audio version, as it were. So in the iOS app and probably Android app as well, you can now chat with ChatGPT as if it's a conversation. And I saw on Twitter that someone had a conversation with ChatGPT as if it was their therapist. So they were saying, hey, this is the kind of day that I've had and so forth. And this lady was like, oh, I felt emotional having such a good conversation. I felt understood and I felt heard, right? So I'm like, if you are a therapist right now, even your kind of like ability to focus for 40 minutes per session or whatever it is, ability to give back feedback if that is needed at all, ability to show that you understand or make them feel like you understand, all those intricacies are being like roped into these ChatGPTs, which you can literally use for free because ChatGPT 3.5 is free. You pay like £10 or £20 for the 4.0, but that's cheaper than therapy. So are you in a job? And it's like, you've got to keep moving. Otherwise you'll be replaced. So it's like, even if you come up with a startup idea, those are being engulfed with the big boys or the big players. So how do you keep moving and shifting? And it's all about trying to like carry on innovating with the way you do something. Because price is always the thing that's going to be the final factor, right? Especially in this kind of like environment. If I can get the same stuff for cheaper, that's a lot of the time the decision maker, let alone if it's better or not sometimes, right? Because if it's like, oh, it's very good, but it's £40, but I can get something, just as good for £10, I'd rather go just as good with £10 with certain areas, right?
I guess it's more if your finances is a bit more tighter, then the lowest price wins. But I think there is still an element in if you trust a company or company has good customer service of, let's say you've had issues with them in the past, but they've been able to deal with it through a phone call or an email. Sometimes you don't mind paying that extra premium because that's what you're paying for. So it's not always the price, but if finances are getting more and more tighter, a lot of the time you might do a bad decision because you're just looking at the price rather than the value for what you're getting. Because sometimes when you pay a little bit more, you actually get a lot more value in doing it rather than trying to save an extra penny.
Customer service and privacy.
Yeah, but you're struggling to call them up because they don't have a proper phone or whatever. Then it's like, was it worth saving that penny? Because actually you've lost out on 3 days work because you've been too busy to fix this issue.
Yeah, because the customer service stuff, if you take, so one of the biggest providers right now for online therapy is BetterHealth, right?
Yeah.
The way that BetterHealth works is you subscribe to them and you pay up front for 4 sessions. You pay up front a month. Now, if I accidentally miss one of those sessions, I don't get it back. I don't get that many back. So the flexibility in that system, because they're so big, they have to be like, cool, we'll take it up front and we pay all these therapists. If you miss your session or whatever, or go out of your like month, so if you cancel, then you can't access them anymore, even though you paid for 4 sessions and so forth. And there's no real decent customer service. They don't really refund you easily because they're just trying to keep the ecosystem and the boat going kind of thing, the ship sailing. So with some of these things, the customer service is so irritating and non-flexible for the kind of on-demand and flexible behaviors and patterns that we typically have of engagement. Sometimes the customer service just is there, but it's just not good. So you're like, cool, I'll prefer a robot that's always there 24/7 and I can have low commitment to it. And also it's not like I have to pay a month up front or anything. So yeah, I do believe that you can affect people on privacy, on customer service. But sometimes having customer service doesn't necessarily mean that there's fluidity in the way that you provide the service. So it is about like decent customer service in the right areas. Because those are typically the things you want. You probably did 3 sessions and you're like, I'm good, I solved the problem. And then you want to be refunded basically for the 4th. And they don't really work like that.
Yeah.
So it's better to be like, cool, I'll do a low commitment of £10 a month for this robot. And the robot probably would be able to do exactly the same things and the same outcome. And it was just a tenner. So unfortunately, I think I'm like, yeah, I will do robot therapy. The one thing that I think is interesting with this is like, if you're in a physical job, like, yes, we've had machines come in, but then if you're in a like you had to get a degree, right? You had to get a degree or some sort of qualification to do this job. Well, now the robots are replacing the ones where you've got degrees and so forth. Another super interesting thing, I know I'm just going one to another on ideas. There's this 2-hour school.
Coming in hot.
Absolutely. There's this 2-hour school in America called Alpha School, where they believe that they can cram down what you need to learn every day into 2 focused hours. And then for the rest of the day, you can focus your time on what you actually want to do. So, for example, there are kids that are interested in entrepreneurship. So they're using the next like 6 hours or so, or 5 hours, to learn entrepreneurship and try that stuff out. There's somebody that's like super into, like they had one of their family members pass away from cancer. So they wanted to research cancer and how to figure out how to improve lifestyle and how lifestyle affected the outcomes when it comes to health and so forth. So she's doing a bunch of research on that. And these are like, I don't know, I think this particular lady with the kind of the cancer research stuff was like 16, 17. And they're super invested in these things. They're like very intelligent because they're using these, like cramming these 2 hours. So they're still getting what they need in. And they don't have the concept of teachers. They have this concept of guides. Now, I didn't realize it is a private thing and you pay $40K to be involved. And the way that they deliver the 2 hours is through apps and through like an AI tutor of some sorts, right? Then they have these human guides. But if you took that idea, built some sort of an education app, you would then, and do it in 2 hours. And we were talking last week about like homeschooling stuff. If you were able to cram in 2 hours and then be like, cool, now let's do what you actually want to do. Cool. Someone's super into like marine biology stuff. Cool. Let's go down to the beach and let's do an experiment or whatever. Like, you know, someone's super into space. Cool. Let's buy a telescope and like look at space and see if we can like figure out if we can find a new star or like name a star off it. You know, like it so goes beyond a typical like secondary school / high school, doesn't it? That I'm like, I'm seeing these pockets of like people prototyping and innovating. I'm so inspired by it that I am genuinely like, so 2 things. 1, I want to do that for my kids. 2, I want to be able to build those ecosystems so other kids can be able to do that stuff, but without the $40K price tag. Because technology is so cheap. So like, could we not do that? Like, and then roll it out in a particular area, and try it out. Again, they do it still in a location, so you still get to see other people and see other kids and stuff. But I found that so fascinating. Like, wouldn't that be insane? Just think of the difference of like life journey and trajectory that you'd have if one, you were able to cram 2 hours, or I say the word cram because it sounds intense, but let's say you were able to achieve everything you needed to achieve in 2 hours every day. And then the rest of the time you could do what you wanted. Like you would be a better footballer for once, right? If you didn't even want to do necessarily a stereotypical thing around like business or study or something, right? You could be a very good athlete. You could be a very good, I don't know, anything, right? So I'm like, I want to take this and apply it again, I always ask the question, what's the smallest iteration? Can you do some, is there a platform that already exists that you pay £20 a month and it's kind of like a schooling platform and you can join in and do it? Like Elon Musk, his second in command, or like one of his like hierarchy people is like an education person. He found that all these parents work for Tesla or the companies that he has are all traveling to drop off their kids and traveling back. And it's a bit of a faff. Why not have like daycare in the office? So then people don't have to travel. So they do some of that stuff in Canary Wharf. Like they'll have a daycare in the bottom floor, for example. So you come to work, drop off your kids, and then for morale, you can go and see your kids at lunch, right? And then go back to work. So he built a school essentially, and their particular angle is problem solving in teams. So realistic problems, solving it in teams, and that's again the best kind of culture. They've recently opened it up to the internet so you can join online. Again, it would be a paid thing. But if you were like, cool, 2 hours a day, you join Elon Musk's school. It's not Elon Musk's school, but it's like Tesla school, as it were, or whatever it was called. Yeah, X school.
X they.
And then in the afternoon, we go out and do exactly what you want to do. So if you want to learn coding, we'll buy a Raspberry Pi and set it up and stuff. I'm like, oh, like absolute options and the variability of all this stuff. And you don't even need to know how to do this stuff. You just be like, give the kid an internet connection and like speak with them about it. And the kid could start researching, DNA structures and so forth. So you don't even need to feel insecure that you don't know this stuff. You'd be like, cool, let's go to a library. Cool, there's this company. Like you just facilitate. As the parent, you should just facilitate. That's why I love the fact that they call them guides. You're just guiding, right? You don't need to know everything. You just guide. So yeah, plethora of stuff, but nonetheless, all comes down to building this like ecosystem and innovation. Those are like the two buzzwords I would say that's making my head. I'm getting off on this innovation and ecosystem stuff, as they would say on Sunny in Philadelphia.
Sunny reference for anyone that watches that. Yeah, it is an interesting one because I think that's what I quite enjoyed with school, in the sense that for me, cramming was doing the topics that you weren't interested in. So for me, it was like languages or something. But then if it was a lighter day, so let's say on a Wednesday it lined up with woodwork, sport, and art, I'd be absolutely loving life, because I remember waiting until you get your timetable and praying that you get an afternoon of chill or a day of chill, that it just happens to line up. Because it is the concept of, if let's say you're a professional football player, you have high intensity workout, then you might have a really low workout, then you'll have a medium, then go back to high, then low, maybe another low because you've had another match. And it's this constant ebb and flow of pushing yourself really hard, not pushing yourself as much, and then doing it quite easy. But all of it is still pushing towards making your glass ceiling go higher. So even like your low bar will slowly increase over time, where I think sometimes we forget about that with more our mental and emotional side. It's more you feel like you have to learn constantly and push yourself constantly. I think that's why a lot of things like meditation and stuff like that, I feel like it's got its place a lot more now, because so many people are probably burnt out from over mentally or emotionally pushing themselves. So now it's trying to find that rhythm. Okay, what is the high pushing myself? What is the medium that I can do longer term? And then what's the short of, I need to chill out or guided meditation or stretch my body or whatever. And it's figuring out those sort of tiers, which I quite like, having that 2-hour sprint. Right, what is your jogging / cycling? And then what is your maybe like swimming or floating or whatever? It's like, what's your full on, and then work backwards. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be more motivated in that 2 hours, as long as you know how to read and how to talk and how to maybe code. Then you'll probably go away and go, I'm really passionate within football analytics. I wonder if I could code something up. And your brain, I'm sure, will be going 100 miles an hour to try and figure that out.
Yeah, it's good to analyze schedule, right? Analyze flow. Again, not only are we talking about, hey, can we be dependent on a particular ecosystem, but could you also align with somebody's day habits? Like Kim is a music artist. She's always positioned herself as like, can I create a track that someone's going to listen to get up in the morning? Can I create a track that people are going to use to get motivated? Can I create a track to help somebody like relax? Can I create a track that helps somebody kind of, when they're exercising or running? And like trying to piece together tracks and songs that align with somebody's day-to-day activities, which will increase the chance of somebody listening to it on repeat in a high volume thing. So if you could have some like a morning wake up alarm or like affirmation type thing, then it aligns really well. Then somebody's going to more likely listen to it every day. And I thought that was such a clever, like such a really innovative way of thinking about like music and aligning that to daily habits to create something, a part of someone's schedule, a part of somebody's lifestyle.
That's really cool.
Going back to the therapist stuff, I'm on a roll today. People on the internet are getting annoyed that individuals, entrepreneurs, innovators, technologists are making money off ChatGPT wrappers. Now, what that means is you create a tool on top of ChatGPT with your little tweaks, and it provides a new service, and then you sell it and you make money off it. And people are annoyed at that. And they're annoyed because, one, they haven't thought about it, and two, they're not the one making the money. right? Yeah. But you've got to recognize the cake is big enough for all of us to take a piece. Going back to the therapy stuff, if you are a therapist or a coach and you're listening right now, coaches are like probably a little bit different because I guess, you know, it could be in the same thing, but let's stick on the therapy side, right? I think what would be very interesting if somebody created a ChatGPT wrapper that provided Christian therapy, right? Some niche. So if you added some like religious therapy, so you would log in, you would say, what religion are you? You'd select Christianity. And then the actual references, the stories, the analogies, and so forth would be Christian, kind of like, I was going to say tinted, but I mean like Christian infused. Tinted sounds like a bad word. Like Christian infused. That is like taking something that exists and adding value. Like adding value bit, like repackage it. That would be very clever. In the same way, if we take dating as a concept exists everywhere, but the ones that are winning are the niche kind of like dating ones, which happen to be religious platforms more so, right? Christian or Muslim dating and kind of thing. I think there's one that's like Islam. So it's like, how do you take those niches and spit them out into something? Because the concept is the same. It's just adding the spice to make it interesting.
When you're saying raps, I thought you were on about like rap battles with AI tools of like songs. I thought you were talking. That'd be cool. Therapy via rapping, Christian rapping.
Well, yeah, I'm.
That's a niche.
Like, I know I'm throwing ideas, but
we'll need to cut this apart just in case we want to take them ourselves.
Yeah. I've been asked to write a blog article by Superbase to do this content storm. So they ask a bunch of people to release content on the same day about a particular feature that they have. And the feature is vector databases. I'm not sure if I've ever shared on the pod before, but vector databases is essentially, rather than having an X and Y coordinate for positioning stuff and then working out, oh, well, X and Y, if you had two things, can you work out if something's close? And if something's close, that means it's related, right? Because it's plotting something on relatability. A vector database is not just the X and Y parameters, it's 1,000 odd parameters. So it's kind of like mapping something in a 3D space. So you can be way more specific about the relatability of different things. Okay. So it's codified. So then you could say, I actually transcribed all my audio of these podcast episodes, created a vector embed, which is essentially this long string of numbers of all the sentences that I gave, which are basically seven words plus and minus 2 either way. So there's an overlap. And then if you ask a question, it searches the database, this vector database for it, and then it'll find like 5 or 6 that it matches up to, uses the 5 or 6 snippets as context to answer the question, right? That concept, I want to do that for music, but it's very difficult to do it with music because you can take the lyrics, so you could split the lyrics and ask a question about lyrics. Yeah. But what I'd like to do is music artists, a lot of the time on Spotify, will suggest other artists that you're similar to, but it doesn't suggest similar songs of the same artist that you would like. And I think that would be more interesting, because if I only want to listen to, let's take Kim, right? I only want to listen to Kim's stuff. I really like her Coming for the Crown song. What's similar to Coming for the Crown in her thing, or like what's closest to it? Because I really like that song. Yeah. And chances are she's done something similar, either thematically speaking or melodically speaking, as in the lyrics or the music. So how do you do that? The music of it is very difficult to transcribe into something that can be put into a vector database. So I was looking at audio embedding and how to do that. Now somebody's created a tool that can do that, and he finds patterns. So let's say you're in a 3D space and you've got like a firework, right? That firework is going around and you can see the path of that firework, right?
Yep.
For like from when it started. And what happens is the song will have like a pattern for the chorus, and then it'll go to a different pattern for the verse, and then it'll come over here, then it'll do something unique over here for the bridge, and then it'll come back for the verse, right? So you can see these patterns in 3D. And the way that he's done that is used a bunch of like machine learning-y type of like data science-y model stuff to map it into a 3D space.
Yeah.
Imagine that was the visualizer when you listen to tracks. But what happens if you put on a VR headset And that was actually a real life, like firework or like visual blurb or something going rounds in circles, and you can walk in and between it while it's happening in a particular like 3D space. So then that could be the music experience. You could have flashing lights, you could have smoke, and then this like visualizer firework, like visual blur moving around in like a space that you're in. And I'm like, that would be so cool. Now I've jumped 1,000 steps ahead, but I want to figure out how to convert audio into something like a vector database so I can write an article about it for the content storm. But it's way beyond my pay grade and beyond my abilities right now. So I'm trying to figure it out. But I'm like very fascinated with the ability to do that. Because then you could be like, okay, if you took it 7-second snippets of the song, you could potentially say that this 7 seconds is similar to these are the 7 seconds. And therefore you could suggest stuff in real time. So if you particularly like the verse, then this verse is similar to song A, song B, and song C for lyrics. And then it's similar melodically to song D and E. So then you could be like, oh, cool, I really like the verse, or I really like the chorus, so here are the suggestions. That tool, I want to build that tool. I'm trying to build that tool by researching audio embedding. So if you're listening
and you understand this,
and you understand exactly what I've just riffed on for the last 2 minutes, then come and find me. So
good way to end.
Yeah. Well, there we go. I've riffed idea after idea after idea. And all of it comes in nicely into innovation and ecosystems. So today or tomorrow or this week, think about how do you continue to innovate and how could you move towards building an ecosystem. Until next time, keep hammering those nails.